Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. I'm your forever host, Joshua Gibson, and I'm joined today by one of the coolest people in USA weightlifting, second only to Sean Rigsby. That's completely a joke. It's just such a joke.
That's
Uh,
that's completely fair. I mean, I feel like we should all be throwing a party for Sean with his new role at USA Weightlifting right now.
And I did want to mention that, yeah, Sean Rigsby uh, was kind of brought on full time to support the sport performance and the performance aspect of USA weightlifting. And maybe that warrants another podcast where we can all jump on a chat with Sean and talk about what that's going to be like, what that looks like for USA weightlifting, what that looks like for Sean. But he's not the focus of today's conversation. Jessie Stemo is the CEO of Power and Grace, long time athlete, long time coach, and weightlifting enthusiast.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I think that's fair. Thanks for the
Okay.
kind intro.
Of
hmm
course, of course. Um, I always start an episode with like a recap of what's been going on, what that turnaround looks like. So for Power and Grace, I know you guys had a camp recently.
hmm
How was that?
Yep, it was so much fun. We had a just athlete training camp in Milwaukee, and we really just focused on keeping it kind of low key, creating an environment where people could do their training, but with their teammates and have a chance for them to get to know their teammates a little bit better. Um, yeah, it was really nice. I think that especially when you're lifting by yourself or you don't get to see your team all the time, you're training remotely, you're training at odd hours without a bunch of people in the gym. I feel like weightlifting can be really lonely for a lot of people. And it was just a nice time to switch it up.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm sure it helps as a coach having that hands-on time too. And I think we sometimes it's easy to, get into that space of like what is our all there will ever be. It's like, oh, the way my lifting is going, the way my technique's progressing, the way I can kind of focus on my movement is just like what it normally is. And then you get, time with your personal coach and it's like, holy crap, like we can make
Mhm.
good progress in, the span of a few hours, a few days. Um, So I think those like regular kind of like check-ins could be are just super helpful. Um, and it's always I think it's always surprising to both people. You're like, oh, that thing you kind of always do. It's like we have some in-person time, and then it's just so much better. And then you're able to
Yes.
make you're either able to like reconceptualize how you can adjust it, um, or get to make some actual really good progress on
Mhm.
things you've been kind of working on for a while.
Yeah.
So I think that's awesome. You guys held that. Any future plans? Thinking about things coming up for Power and Grace that people who are either a part of the team or thinking about it could look forward to.
Mhm. Yeah, I think definitely we're gonna plan more athlete camps. So not in the dead of winter in Milwaukee because that would suck. But we will probably do something in the spring, early summer for a next athlete camp and have it be pretty similar, maybe a few little different things this next time around. We also have athletes at AO2. So
Mm.
this week, I would imagine the podcast will be out after that, but that is upon us. I'm flying tonight for that competition. And otherwise, I don't think we have a ton of big things. We've got finals coming up and sort of related to Power and Grace, but not completely related to Power and Grace. I am going to start coaching USA level ones this
Oh wow,
fall.
awesome.
Yeah, this fall and early next year. So I'm excited about that. I think that's going to be a really cool way to like connect with other people
Mm.
in the sport and with people who are coming into the sport. So I'm stoked about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's super exciting. Yeah, and kind of before we dig into today's topic, and just quickly kind of add to that, like I have a few people coaching at USAPL regionals um, in Vegas next weekend. So
Okay.
yeah, Tiny Tiff will be competing, and it's
Mhm.
gonna be fun to coach. I haven't coached her like in person since I've been
Yeah.
working with her, and I've never coached her as a meet, having prepared her for that competition. And I'm super excited because
Mhm.
I know that I'm a great competition coach. Like I show up, like everything runs really well. I understand how to, prepare people for peak performance. And for her to be on the cusp of, she just, squatted like 137.5 at like, 50 kilo body weight or whatever,
Mhm.
and is right there for either all-time PRs or like a total that's going to give her what's called a 500 dots, which is
Mhm.
in powerlifting, that's pretty rarefied air. So looking forward to that weekend in Vegas. And then um other local meets coming up. So a lot of coaching, which I think is kind of the crux of the podcast and the topic of today's talk, which is, from the coaching standpoint, how to make training effective, like hard enough, challenging enough, how to push when you need to push, and also backing off when you need to back off to allow for that kind of like bringing back up to baseline and then exceeding it.
Mhm.
And the reason why I was thinking about this topic is because, I knew we were going to record this podcast. You obviously have just such a tremendous amount of experience, both as a coach and an athlete. You've trained under so many different coaches, trained for so long. And I'm sure you have a gauge or a sense of how hard do you really need to work to make progress.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes that it's easy to lose sight or lose touch with that
Mhm.
and think like, oh, I'll just do a program that's kind of on the internet. I don't know if that's still popular. I remember when I was coming up, it's like, oh, just find this random program. It's
Mhm.
free, and just do it. And it's like rep maxes or double days or like 3 days a week, just kind of like snatch, clean, jerk. And that I think that's kind of going the way of the dinosaurs. Like even thinking back to when I started in weightlifting, and the knowledge around programming, at least in my circle, was very uh like I'm trying not it was like train like the Bulgarians, right? So it's very, very
Yeah,
simple.
yeah.
It was very
It was
simple.
very much so, "This is how we've done it, so this is how we're gonna do it."
Yeah, yeah, and how other people have done it, so it's how we should do it.
Yes.
And there was like there's like kind of no like movement into understanding like the underlying aspects of training that would
Mhm.
support it and individualize it, and then also do it in a way that is sustainable and effective.
Mhm.
I think back to like my favorite sound bites, and they were something along the lines of, you don't need to do accessory work, you don't need to be in the squat rack, you need to snatch and you need to clean and jerk to make progress. And
Mhm.
while that makes sense, like inherently, and there's a logic to it, I think from just like this more complete development standpoint, it loses a person um, for that little mantra. Um,
I
so
think that's good. I like the way that you put that
yeah,
last sentence. Like, I think it can work for, like, 12 weeks, maybe longer, get
totally.
people stronger. But for the long-term development, for longevity, it does tend to kinda bury people.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think that it loses, I think I kind of mentioned this. I think I mentioned this earlier. It's just the way I was explaining it of like you can get into this headspace of feeling like you know your limits either way. It's like,
Mhm,
okay, this is just how I train. This is how strong I am, or this is how good my technique is. This is
mhm,
kind of about how good it's going to be. I'll never quote unquote move like an elite athlete. I'll never be, that much stronger. I think I've hit a plateau. I mean, I'm sure as a coach you've heard that. Like, I think I've kind of hit my potential or hit a plateau or something. And as coaches, you think like, no, everyone can move perfectly and they can continue getting stronger, for a very, very long time.
mhm,
And I think that aspect of like really seriously individualizing training is allowing people and prescribing them the work to help them realize, and when I say realize, like to manifest like really fucking good technique, like really,
yes,
really good
yeah,
technique. And I think that's really possible. Um, And, I think we both were able to do that really well, and we displayed that over and over again. But that, like, period of training that was more, here's something that's going to work, but it's going to work more by, like, brute crude force than kind of strategy,
Mhm.
individualizing, and then, like, subtle adjustments along the way, and creating a program that, if you were to hand it to anybody, they're like, oh, this, I don't know if this really makes sense, but for the context, it's, like, completely appropriate.
Mhm.
So from your experience, when were the periods, besides just being, like, really new to weightlifting or able to make really good progress because you happen to, like, be physically maturing, did you make the best progress as a weightlifter, and what did that look like? And then how does that differ? I mean, I'm gonna ask, like, 8 questions. If it
Okay.
does differ from what you found you think works best, like, why did it differ?
Mhm. That's a good question, and it's a tricky one to answer, I feel like, thinking back on 10 years of weightlifting, because I feel like there were, pockets of progress, and I think they probably all happened in different ways for
Mm,
different reasons.
yeah,
When I first started lifting, I was young and, like you said, like, maturing, and so I think there was gonna be progress sort of regardless of the work that you're putting in, because you're new, training age is low, you're also just young, and so progress is gonna be made. I think big picture, though, the times when I was making the best progress really came down to it being a time when I was being extremely intentional in all
mm,
pieces of training and recovery. So, times when I was able to be getting the best sleep, eating really well, super consistent with that, super consistent and intentional with the way that I was warming up, the way that I was cooling down. I think that those are the pieces that then allow you to push harder in training. And then that allows you to
mm,
make more progress. Because if you're really pushing hard in training, you're training 8 sessions a week, and those recovery pieces aren't there, like, you're just going to get hurt. And so it's like you have to balance, how much work can I do that I can still recover from? And I think the times when I was making the most progress is when there was that sweet spot of, I'm able to recover from a lot of work
yeah.
because I'm being really intentional about that. I think also just intentionality in training, and being very, I don't know what the word is. I think just being very in tune with your body at every turn. And that comes down to your warm up sets, trying hard on your warm up sets, making sure that you are moving the bar like you want to move your top sets. And really, like, listening to how everything feels, because then that is what sort of allows you to figure out, okay, where do maybe we need to make adjustments? Where are things breaking down that I need to put some focus on?
No, I think that's all great. I think that idea of intentionality is, like, really important, and even thinking about it as you're talking through it, the what I found, even thinking back to, like, training last night, it's just having some point of focus during a session is just, like,
Mhm,
so helpful in driving it forward in some way, right? If
mhm,
you just go in, it's like, oh, there's just work to be done.
mhm,
I think you're probably more okay with letting that work just kinda happen, if that makes sense, of, like, oh, like, my snatches were kinda all over the place, or my cleans were all over the place, or jerks were just kinda chaotic. Or they're like, oh, they were just really good. They're just kinda locked in. But I find having that, like, point of focus, like, something to be intentional about each session helps drive the quality of it. So you have a gauge of if it's getting, if you're able to make headway during a session. And then I think I probably, that's gonna sound like a broken record at some point, but that idea of momentum as being one of the most important training variables. It's like, if you can have a focus, feel like you made headway toward that, it's like that's going to lead into the next one where it's like, okay, I'm doing really well on making this adjustment, tolerate, like, building training volume up.
mhm,
With Danny last night, like, she was squatting and she was sending me videos in real time, and, like, hey, make this adjustment, like, do this with, push your knees out, whatever. And we kind of talked through it a little bit. Then I sent her a voice message that was like a few minutes long, and she's like, "Oh, this is not me learning how to squat or relearning how to squat." I was like, "Oh, we always revisit basics,
Yeah.
always revisit basics." And a lot of that is just like this time when we revisit them, it's probably a smaller adjustment that you can be more intentional about because you have more
Yeah.
bandwidth, and it's
Yeah.
not from top to bottom learning how to perfect a movement, or hey, this really egregious error, we just have to fix that. So
Mhm.
I think that idea of like a sole focus for the session, technical, or even just feeling like you're moving the bar quickly or
Mhm.
moving it intentionally. I mean, that can even be like a focus of just being intentional,
Yeah.
just being more mindful, just being more present. And I think those things just kind of stack to where
Yeah.
when those all become um, a bit like subconscious, training just ends up being very productive more often than
Yeah.
trying to find productivity in training.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think there's this idea that to get better, you do more work. I feel like that's a very standard athlete idea,
Yeah.
but I think you could take two athletes, give them the same exact workout, same exact 4-week block, and assuming their bodies are adapting in the same way, nobody's bodies are gonna do that, but just for the sake of the analogy, you give 2 athletes the same training block. The one that's just showing up, going through the motions, just, I mean, I think you can be intentional and still, like, chat it up at the gym, but,
Oh, sure.
chatting it up
Yeah.
at the gym, not paying attention to their rest periods, like, just distracted the whole time. They're still doing the work. They're checking all the boxes. Maybe they're not even missing their lifts. And then you have the athlete who is being intentional from their bar set all the way through. They're moving fast. Like, that athlete that is being intentional, is going to make more progress
Mm.
than the athlete who's going through the motions. And that athlete's not doing any more work. It's just the way that they're doing the work is going to set them up to be better in the long term. And I think that that's a really, like, important thing to as an athlete to ask yourself, like, am I getting the most out of my training? Like, is my lack of progress coming from me not doing enough work, or is it coming from me not doing the work well?
Yeah.
And you think you should always tackle the way that you're working before trying to pile more things on.
Yeah, I love that. And there's one thing that as you're kind of talking about that, intentionality piece and how the quality of the work can differ between two people doing the same work. I would just think about like my experience of performing a lift and how I'll do it and there's this like mental tagging of like I like my very last snatch last night. I caught it and like, whatever timing was better. A lot of things felt good. And I kind of felt this shift in the bottom and I was like, oh, that was like it's not really what I would like to happen.
Mhm.
And there's a tag of like, okay, that rep was a little off. But you can also do that the other way where it's like, wow, that rep felt really good because my timing was more intentional. Like my
Mhm.
turnover was more intentional, or like my feet were flatter. I could feel my feet were flatter. I was over the bar longer. Um, I could feel the bar stay, all these little like aspects of the lift. You can almost like mentally tag it as like, oh, that was a good one. I would like to continue doing that. And then
Yeah.
you're able to kind of continue stacking those together. And then that's when, either you can make more refined adjustments or you can kind of shift the focus a little bit. Cause like, wow,
Mhm.
this aspect of it now, you're fucking crushing that. Like when you receive snatches, you're so tight and locked in overhead and the bar looks so stable and secure. Now we can work on getting it there in this like other way. Um,
Mhm.
and I think a lot of that is like, yeah, kind of having that approach more dialed in. And then also during each rep, just kind of being present with the rep itself,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
I don't know if other people experience it like that. I don't have access to their inner experience, but that's how it feels to me of you have this like qualitative component where it's like you do a rep and you can just feel if it was more of what you want or less of
Mhm.
what you want. Or just like it was like a decent set.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you have to be present in order to feel those things,
Yeah.
and I think it's so valuable to to be feeling those things and evaluating and comparing from session to session and month to month. Yeah, there's so much more progress to be made there. And it's a funny thing. I was like thinking about this kind of as we've been talking. It's funny because a lot of this does sound really obvious.
Yeah.
Like it
Yeah.
sounds super obvious to just be like, well, just try harder in your training sessions. Not necessarily try harder, but like be intentional, move
Yeah.
well. Like those things sound really, really obvious. But I think that maybe it's the kind of thing that a lot of people miss because when you first start weightlifting, you can just do some snatches and get better. And
Yeah.
so a lot of people in like the start of their careers make progress regardless of how intentional they're being. And I think the longer that you're in it, the more that that piece becomes really valuable. And so I wonder if maybe people miss it because it's not as true to like their initial experience in the sport. And it's like something you have to grow into as an
Mm.
athlete in order to make continued progress.
Yeah. In kind of the same way you were thinking about that, I was thinking about um having knowledge of what you need to do and how important that is. And
Yeah.
because as you start out, you just perform the movements and you get better. It's like your body's adapting.
Yeah.
But to have like a deep understanding of the movement and to allow like that directionality to occur does
Mhm.
require some sort of like guidepost of I need to know I would in theory, I mean this is the way I would think about it. I need to know what I need to do to be able to do it. If you
Mhm.
just tell me to snatch, like I'll approximate it. And I see this because I work with young kids. You just, you demo the movement and you show them, and then they approximate it. And they
Mhm.
generally approximate it pretty crudely. It's like, oh, I think this is about right. And then I'll show, then you could show them, you're like, no, this is what I want. And they would still do it like differently. And it's not, I don't think it's because they don't care, but it's like they haven't ingrained that sense of, no, like these are the guideposts for the movement, and this is what I'm working toward, or this is what I'm trying to feel or to do. Instead, it's just like, oh, I'll just do what's called a dead bug comes to mind because I was doing this last night, but like I'll just do what's called a dead bug. And I
Mhm.
see it, I've seen a trillion ways to perform it at this point.
Yeah.
Having prescribed it to, a lot of people. And it's like, yeah, that's close. We need to understand what we want to do though. So then when I tell you like, no, we're moving, get in this position, do that, you have a sense of if that's more right or more
Mhm.
correct.
Mhm.
And I think that as a coach, that's probably easier to understand. Of you, Jesse, could describe a perfectly executed snatch, like from start to finish, probably every freaking centimeter of the lift.
Mhm.
Then when you say, and I'm working on this phase, this section, that like completely makes sense to you, and you would know what that would then feel like, would then
Mhm.
look like, and then what it would ultimately do for your lifting. And then I
Mhm.
think, we kind of work with everyone from rank beginner of, learning that a snatch is an exercise to, performing at the highest level possible, the most efficient way possible, the biggest weights possible. And a lot of that is getting people on the same page of understanding of,
Yeah.
no, that's not the correct way to do it. It's just the way you're doing it. Here's how we change how we conceptualize it, which is, you know, the start's going to look like this: position of the knee, position of the hip, turnover, whatever, and then
Mhm.
adding those layers of refinement, which always feels simple, but ends up spanning more time and being more complex, and then taking those more like aha moments to be able to process the information itself.
Yeah. Yeah. My wheels are spinning. Yeah, it's like the being able to be intentional comes from that understanding and being able to feel it, which is something that takes time to learn in the sport.
Yeah, and I think that's where the whole like philosophical side of weightlift, the whole like brand and podcast would fit in, is because it's asking the bigger questions, having the bigger understanding, so that
Mhm.
you can then, be more intentional. It's the same thing. I mean, we could really liken this to, I my mind goes to like just basic like morals. It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, you have a way to kind of live and operate in the physical world. You could also learn to be more intentional about that and to then be. to do things that are more aligned with your values, which would be,
Yeah.
yeah, just like not causing unnecessary suffering, right? Like I would like to do less of that. It's like, well, how
Mhm.
do you do that? It's like at base, you probably have a proclivity, which is you cause X amount. Then you read, some Socrates or, whoever, and then you
Mhm.
probably, you probably cause less of it and you do less of it because you have information that can provide context to, yeah, well, that person is like emotionally, more reactive and volatile and kind of blew up. And like, I didn't want to give into it. So I chose to not be impulsive and not to do it's.
Mhm.
So I think that kind of spans all threads of, physical, if we call like big buckets, physical activity, actual physical performance, like sport performance, high level performance, psychological stuff, like well being,
Yeah.
and then like peak, peak performance from the mental side too. Is it does require a lot of, I think it would require a lot of education in the sense of knowing the map. And then
Yeah.
different, everybody's genetics are going to change that landscape a lot. It's going to change the map. So
Mhm.
some people have a broader territory, more rich territory.
Mhm.
Some people have like a smaller territory, maybe a little less rich. It's all still really fun to explore and understand. And I think it's important to do that anyway, so you can best navigate it from a performance standpoint. It's like know what and maybe you differ, but like know know the snatch really well to snatch well. Know the
Mhm.
clean really well. Know the jerk. Know every movement. And then that's going to allow you to get as much out of it as possible. And you can push it really hard if you want to. And then you can then lean into that saying more work is probably better. And I think that's also true. I say that a lot. The more high quality you can work, probably the better your adaptations and the more
Yeah.
progress you're going to make.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you wanna try to be gradually working more as you go, and I think that's a good way to tell if somebody is adapting, is being, "Okay, could we handle more volume this cycle than we could the last cycle?" And that's big picture where you wanna go. You wanna be maybe doing more volume, doing more work at the end of the year than you did at the start of the year. But if you don't have that
Wow.
base of the
Yeah.
work being done well, then you might just get hurt. So, and I like what you said there too, just about morality too. If you move carelessly through
Yeah.
your life,
Yeah.
if you move carelessly through training, it, you're going to potentially cause unintended
Yeah.
damage. And whether that be in life, in relationships, because you just weren't there, you weren't present, you weren't moving through interactions intentionally. In training, if you're not moving through your sessions, through your lifts, through your weeks intentionally, you're going to miss important things that could be like missed areas of progress or focus. You could miss cues from your body
Mm.
that might mean you need to back off, and that would keep you healthy. Like if you miss that cue and you just push right through it, you might get hurt. And so being intentional, I think, keeps you healthy, and it also helps you make progress. Like I know for myself, there's a very specific way that my core will get sore sometimes from doing things really heavy in the front rack. And it's very subtle, and it took me a while to learn like what that was. And if I notice that my core is sore in that way, I know I have to be really careful with my back. If I
Mm.
push through even the littlest like grindy squat on a day when my core is sore in that way, like my back is going to be messed up. And I know that because I've like paid attention.
Yeah.
But if I were to just like cruise through my workout, not pay attention, not really be like feeling things out, I could accidentally get hurt. And I think it's similar for most athletes. Like if you're paying attention, if you're in tune with your body, if you're communicating with your coach about what you're noticing, then you're going to be able to have that longevity in the sport. But if you're moving carelessly, you're probably going to get hurt when maybe it could have been avoided.
Yeah. And I think that's important. That's a really important point and like super helpful to contextualize all this. There's a post I put up, and it's so funny thinking back on it. But it was something along the lines of like, oh, because I was training really hard, and it's like I said something about like, oh, my left leg is really sore, my right leg feels fine, And then I remember just shortly after that, my knee started to really just give me a lot of issue, and I had to
Mm,
back off really hard for a while. And I remember thinking about that, like, oh, the timing of like this weird extreme soreness in one of my legs, and then that knee kind of just didn't feel great after. Um, and it's like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I pushed really hard, and it was like unanticipated soreness, and then just continued to train. And the reason I bring that anecdote up is because there could be this like offloading with technology of all the stuff I could think about or pay attention to or try to process. I can just let it live on the internet of, I watch videos and that's my technical analysis instead of like trying to feel the difference and change it and be intentional and saying like, oh, the
right.
video kind of reflects that.
Mhm.
Or,
Mm.
I did a heavy set of squats last night, kind of watching them. It's like, I didn't look as bad as I thought. I probably had a couple more in the tank, but I was very present with that set. And same with technique. It's like being very present with that, not offloading it to just kind of after the fact. Um, Being present with like how training feels and how you process it like psychologically and physically, and not just like offloading that. So like it's all here and it's not, with you. Um, and as a coach, I guess that's easier. I mean, we talk about this from like a very privileged perspective of we've taken it to the extreme of doing it and thinking about it and understanding it. Everyone listening is going to span this spectrum of maybe not rank beginners unless you're like Reddit most popular weightlifting podcast, and then mine comes up, and then you're listening to it.
Mhm.
Or you're Brett Wagner. Shout out to Brett who sent me a message, a very kind message of just found the podcast, started binging it, and is like listening to it while he lifts. So Brett, if you are doing this, take a video of you listening to this section while you're lifting. It'll be very meta. We would really appreciate that. Um, but it spans the spectrum of like that to you have world level coaches who listen to the podcast or are on it, and everyone's going to be different in their own journey through the sport, and that process at which you start, you're going to have access to different information, different experiences, different people, a different landscape, really, because we open the podcast with, this is how people talked about training when we started. You need to snatch and clean and jerk. It's the most important thing. Go heavy, push that. Everything should be heavy. Everything should be really hard. You got to compete. You have to compete with people, and that's going to drive intensity, which is going to drive the adaptations you make. And now the narratives are not that. I don't know what the narratives are. I don't know how people are marketing like weightlifting programming, but I think a lot of it's pushed towards it's more individualizing it. Um, I don't know, meeting people where they're at. I really don't know, but it feels a lot more right now. Air quotes, the way people talk about training feels more correct. And I don't know if you would agree with that or if you have like a similar feeling.
Yeah, I think so. I think that those models of training where you just snatch and clean and jerk all the time to max all the time. Like we said, for 12 weeks, you're probably going to get super strong. Sorry about my dog. If you can hear him in the background, he can see something out the window and is really not happy about it. Um, sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
I got him. I got him locked down. But anyway, I think, yeah, for 12 weeks, you might get really strong. And that's great. But in terms of your longevity, unless
Yeah.
you are maybe on drugs, it's probably not going to be what's best for you. I mean, I think about when I was new and lived at the training center, my training was very much so snatch and clean and jerk all the time, really heavy, 9 sessions a week. And it was really hard. Like, just, it was hard. It was a lot of work. I remember crying on my way to the gym, like walking into the gym, like wiping tears away to go warm up
Yeah.
and then just turning around and doing it again. And I got really strong. Like, I made a lot of progress, but I also left that environment pretty injured and pretty beat up and with a lot of things that I had to kind of like pull back in order to to
Yeah.
heal and to balance out. And so I do think that now with most, like what you were saying, with more of an individual focus, I think that it's setting people up to be healthier in the sport
Yeah.
for longer. And I think that that's really important because I mean nobody wants to just train for 6 months and then feel hurt and frustrated and then look back on a couple training sessions that were great. And maybe you do. Maybe you just want to be like I'm going out with a bang and cool. But I think for most people they want to like do weightlifting for a while and enjoy it for a while. And that does take an individual approach to accomplish that.
Yeah. How do you gauge then as a coach? How would you gauge? I mean, obviously, like you have certain proxies like weight on the bar, intensity, volume of work, but from an effort standpoint, how are you getting people close enough to working at a sufficient level? Like, how
Mhm.
are you gauging that? How are you prescribing? How are you thinking about it so that you're not just so far from working really hard or
Yeah.
pushing and just kind of like beating your head against a wall, trying to just say like, well, eventually, if you hit a plateau long enough, it'll break, it'll fracture.
Mhm. Mhm. I think that it's still important to work in maximal attempts, work in rep maxes, whatever you want to call it. Like I'll write in you have a green light today to push it. I think that working in opportunities for that is important so that you make sure that you are working from a place that's challenging. If, say, I have a 4-week block and we're trying to build to like a heavy 5 at the end, if I start that 4-week block and write a set of 5 that I think is going to be heavy and it's actually
Yeah.
just stupid light for this person, and then I work off of that for the whole rest of the block, or we might not really be getting productive work in.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to, as a coach, communicate the intent of the workout with your athlete.
Mm,
There are certain sessions where the intent is like, hey, I want this to be a heavy double. Maybe I don't want you to sell your soul to make it. Maybe I don't want you to miss, but like, I want this to be a heavy double. And if
yeah.
it's not, we need to do something
Yeah. Yeah.
different. Like,
Yeah.
if maybe you're selling your soul, you're missing, and you're getting hurt, like, "Hey, stop,
Yeah.
please," because that's not the intent. But also, if you make it and it feels like a warm-up set, like, you gotta go up and make it heavy so that we've got a baseline to work off of for the rest of the block or at the end of a block. "Hey, we're trying to have fun. We're trying to, like, go heavy here." There is some room, I think, to adjust the percentages based on how the athlete's moving and feeling, and I think that piece is just strictly communication. You have to make
Mhm.
sure the athlete knows the intent of the workout, and then you have to make sure the athlete's communicating with you about what they're feeling in the session. I mean, like we're kind of doing on your program. Like we've got the little RPE
Yeah.
situation at the start so that we
Yeah.
can see, okay, was this session super easy? Was it super hard? Where did we kind of land on that scale? And then that can inform how we move into the next week and the next week.
Yeah. I found having and maybe again, I have a bit of a privileged perspective, but like knowing there's a change coming is helpful in those periods of like, we'll just push really hard, try really, really hard. And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, because I know that, next week or the week after, it's like things change. I think if you don't probably have a sense of, and I could do this better as a coach, right? Communicating effectively of like, hey, this week is going to be hard, next week's going to be easy. So push really hard, and then we can always. Well, I did have a call about this with Tiff. I called her over the weekend randomly because I did tell her like, hey, this week it's really important we do X, Y, and Z, and it's
Mhm.
really important we do this for this reason, and then we can always back off of being too fatigued. You try not to push into territory where it's like higher risk of injury, but we can always back off of being too fatigued if we're performing well. But you can't really like push performance up if you're not, fatigued to some extent. So
Mhm.
I like that idea of like, hey, push hard when you feel good. We can always back off, but don't just like always play it safe because we don't want to miss those periods of being able to push and take advantage of it because those like periods of testing and pushing also build into driving your like technique and driving your strength up. Um, so I think that communication key is peace.
Mm.
The piece is key
Is
and very important. So I really like that. I like that you hammered home on that. And then hammered home on, also starting a block with like more open-ended sets that can then anchor programming. And I know when I worked with Glenn, he did that at the start. The only problem I ended up hitting is I sold my soul for a set of five in the squat, and then everything else was based off that.
Yeah.
And I just like couldn't beat it because I remember one day I felt so good and I squatted like 175 for five. And then the next week it was a 5x5 at 90% of that.
Mhm.
And holy cow, was that hard. And then it
Dead.
was like a 4x5 at 93% and a
Yeah.
3x5 at 96% and a 2x5 at 98%. And every time we'd get back to that point of testing the set of five, because he would just repeat blocks of fives, I would miss the fifth rep and I'd miss
Mhm.
the fifth rep. And like after you do that twice, you're like, I don't think this program's gonna work. Like for me. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of training is anticipating. A lot of good programming is anticipating, especially in like a block model where things are gonna change strategically to drive weight on the bar, drive specificity, drive you closer to what you're gonna do when you compete. And I think it's finding the progressions within that are going to be most effective, which allow you to push hard and then
Mhm.
give you another opportunity to push hard in another successful way, not push hard in the same way and then possibly plateau or possibly just like hit a wall where it's like, wow, I really like maximized, this rep max or this exercise. If we do it again, I might not be able to like one up that. So if
Yeah.
you can change it strategically, it allows you
Mhm.
to then like carry that success into a slightly different type of, training or exercise or rep scheme. So
Yeah, definitely. So, how do you, I guess, you probably have answered it in little pieces throughout, but how do you make sure that an athlete is working hard enough and like we're getting enough out of the training? And does it differ between a weightlifter and a power lifter?
yeah, that's a great question. And I think I always think back to like coaching in person and then coaching remotely. And I think I envy all the weightlifting coaches who are in person with like a massive club like that. To be able to make on the fly adjustments is so the word easy comes to mind. That's not what I mean, but like
Yeah.
convenient. It's like, hey, that looks really good. Go up.
Yeah.
That looked really, really good. Go up. Like take it up.
Hmm.
Or, because I also do S&C. So it's like, hey, that looked really ragged, like very bad. Go down. Like just go down a little bit.
Yeah. Let's
Uh,
let's stop there.
do some drop sets. Hey,
Yeah.
next time maybe don't, and with young kids, especially who want to train hard, they must have a billion souls because they sell it every single session. It's like, every session you're like, hey, just you gotta scale. We gotta scale. Let's do
Mhm.
what we can to build momentum into next week. Um, because if you find that wall, it's almost like if I tell you to imagine a pink elephant, it's like, or sorry, if I tell you not to imagine a pink elephant, you're gonna be like, oh, yeah, I won't do that. But when you find that wall, it's like so much easier to think about it and see it and be
Mhm.
present. When you aren't sure where it is, you're like, maybe I have like another 20 kilos in me. Like maybe I have
Yeah.
another 25. I don't know. So I think it's from my standpoint, I probably err on the side of being a little more cautious, not finding that wall all the time. But
Mhm.
that's really important then that training's effective and good and builds a lot of momentum. So I think one thing I would, I'm gonna instead of answering the question with like how I do that well, I think just communicating people to like open up more often, at least like at the start of a block, just helps anchor weights. Otherwise, as a coach who does like program everything out very specifically, um, unless you've worked with someone for a long time, it can be a little off base. Like if you're saying like, "Hey, fine, this is what I think is going to be hard," and then someone's like, "No, that was like super breezy," then
Mhm.
it's like, okay, we have to kind of push things up and ramp hard. So I think being in touch with training,
Yeah.
is the easiest way to be able to prescribe it well. And then a lot of that, the rest of it is going to be kind of creating like a more and more narrow funnel. So you prescribe a certain amount of work, and then you see how they respond to it, and then saying, okay, I know if we do more, we'll probably improve. So we should probably try to over time add more work, like each program, um, or just like do the same amount of work, but maybe start with it being a little more intense. So I think a lot of that's like the process is kind of dragged out, getting the right feedback, and then implementing it week to week, and just having also athletes who are intentional. Like shout
Mhm.
out to Eric, um, who got married recently. Congrats, Eric, if you're listening to this. I don't know if you are, but he'll like in his sheet, he'll put, on that little formula that'll kick out a weight, he might put like at the end of it, like +3, +5. And he's
Mm.
like adjusting sets, or he might, you know, open it up a little bit more than that and say, like, hey, I just added weight because I was feeling really good.
Mhm.
That is the most important part. It's like, know that the program is going to be an approximation and that you can take it into your own hands, so to speak, to make it what you need on the day. Uh,
Mhm.
so a lot of that isn't, there's probably no perfect way for me. It's just, it's like seeing it as a process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which I
for
think is
sure.
probably where most coaches are going to be, and I think they're just trying to approximate that process, better or worse. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that. I think you just have to communicate.
Yeah.
You have to communicate and pay attention, and I think that then you're able to adjust how you need and make future decisions well. So,
Yeah. Do you have um a sense of, and I guess a lot of this is like so individual, it's based on the person, how they experience training. Um, but I guess like when we talk about training hard, it's like, what does that actually look like, or what does that actually mean? So is it going to like a top set that's technically pretty good but kind of on edge? Like how are
mhm,
you gauging those, like, green lights or rep maxes? Go to a miss, go to where your technique kind of falls off a bit. Like I guess when you do prescribe it, say coaches listening are going to write a training block. Week one, we're gonna put in some rep max testing, which are like, if we want to use jargon, like KPIs, and then those are ultimately going to be what we track to see if we're making progress.
mhm, mhm. Usually the note that I'll put in is something along the lines of work to a heavy set with no misses
Mm, yeah,
and limit technical breakdown. So if they feel like there's a good chance they're gonna miss in the next set, they're not sure if they're gonna make it, I'll usually say, maybe not. And then I think we work in those opportunities of true rep maxes far less
okay,
than
yeah,
the work to a heavy set.
okay,
So in the first week of a block, it's always just work to a heavy set, unless it's like a press. If you miss a press, I don't really care that much.
yeah,
I
yeah,
want it to actually be a max. But for a squat or a lift, or if we're doing deadlifts or something, I'm going to make sure that they're not working to failure, because I think that's the kind of thing that can throw off the rest of the block. If you work to failure a bunch in one training week and then try to move into the following, like that is, it's probably too much to then get a bunch of productive work in the following week or the following days.
yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. And that brings uh Logan Gruber, I think is his last name.
Yeah,
Logan?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he had that like, I call it a brand for a while, but it was like work too heavy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yes.
I
Yeah.
remember that way back. He actually sent me stickers that were work too heavy.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I love that. And
I
and I
miss
think
Logan.
about that now, like that's a great idea, and just like a great way to communicate it. Um, like RPE, not RPE like literal, but like on an effort level, like 8.5
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
probably like 8.5 to 9 maybe. And then depending on the exercise, realistically too, I think there's a sense of, if you, because like I would think about a heavy set of deadlifts, I'm probably going to push it like hard, so it's challenging and kind of slow, but I'm never as a weightlifter going to push that until like I'm rounding over, and because I can, like, I can pull a lot of weight and probably get out of position, but it's like It's just not it's not worth that. If you're thinking like training weeks instead of a training day. So communicating that too. It's like you push this pretty hard, make it really challenging, get tired,
Mhm.
but keep the quality always as the focus.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder because I'll watch, some weightlifters have sessions where they miss and miss and miss and miss. And that probably happens more often during your own training when you felt like pretty freaking peaked as an athlete. Were you missing a ton? Were there ever periods where you were missing a ton? Um, I guess what did that kind of look like from like like miss 6 snatches in a session and then make a lift? And how important is it really, do you think, to make a snatch after 5 misses?
I would say don't. Just no.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, if you're trying to compete in weightlifting, you only get 3 on the platform,
Yeah.
so, yeah, I don't know when it's practical to miss that many times and then try again. Um, I think probably when I was in my best shape, I was not missing often at all. Maybe a couple times a training block.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah, not often at all.
Yeah.
I sometimes, like, a random I goofed that, not heavy, miss.
Yeah.
Just accidentally threw behind you, and it's an easy adjustment, and then misses because 'cause they're heavy, very, very, very rarely.
Wow.
Um, and I think for me, I it just was too dangerous. Like,
Mm.
I if I'm gonna miss because it's heavy, the residual fatigue from that just was way too much, to manage well, especially, like, on a clean. I mean, maybe in a cycle missing a clean because it's heavy, like, once,
Yeah.
and that was kind of an accident. And then snatches a little bit more. I think it's easier to miss a snatch and not get wrecked. Squats, also very, very rarely
Mm.
would I miss. It just didn't feel worth it. And I think sort of had the mindset of if I missed because it was technical, maybe try again. If I missed because it was heavy, I pretty much always moved
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. I mean that's like music to my ears. I mean, that's how I feel. And I think when you have like a high level of efficiency, like I know when I just don't miss cleans, like, cause I'd
Mhm.
probably just like wimp out. But it's because I can rack anything. Like I can literally get under anything. And it just gets to a point where it's so heavy and it smashes you so badly. And it's like, I don't want to miss because I can't stand it up because that means I have to rack something that's literally so heavy I cannot squat it, and
Yeah.
that's gonna be really uncomfortable, and I
Starts
just
to turn into front squat volume.
yeah, yeah, no, totally, right? It's like, okay, now
Yeah.
and I tell this anecdote to athletes that I coach because 'cause they're like, "Well, I haven't, I can only front squat this." It's like, "Well, I've had weeks where I'll clean 150 and front squat 150, and they're both maxes." And it's like, so if you can front squat, you can still clean it, and, like, at a competition, that's reassuring. But what that means in training is like I'm not gonna max a clean out unless I'm like grooving and I'm making very obvious progress and I can feel that adaptation taking place. And then suddenly like the rack's cleaner, technique's better, legs are stronger, and and then my 100% is more like a 95%,
Mhm.
but like I just remember there's like a program I did, and it was kind of called Snakes and Ladders, but it's you add weight until you miss, and then you go down, and then you like weight back up until you miss, and then you go down. You go down. Um, and I remember like you just hit some big cleans, and you get so smashed by it, and you're like, if I put more weight on, I'm gonna Clark it. If I go down a little bit, I'm probably gonna Clark it still.
Uh-huh.
So I kind of feel with you. I think that idea of like missing snatches or like snatching so hard that you're kind of missing to make. I don't know if that drives like the snatch up really, really well.
Mhm.
I just feel like your technique kind of then starts to either like plateau or fall apart a bit, and like old habits kind of sit there.
Yeah, well, and then your training misses.
Yeah.
You do 5 if you
Yeah.
miss 5 times in a session where you're kinda working too heavy, that's a huge percentage of the work that you're doing that's not makes.
Yeah, yeah, and you don't, and at some point you probably wouldn't want to be again at a lower level. You wouldn't want to be okay with that in the sense of, oh, I'll just like come in and miss, and if I miss, like that's totally cool. Like it's
Mhm.
like I think part of that there's this like funny, not funny, but like interesting saying of pressure being a privilege.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I haven't thought enough about that to agree or disagree with it, but that idea of big lifts should have pressure, but like in the sense of like, okay, I'm ready for it, I'm prepared for it, I can make it. But if you've missed enough to where like, oh, it's just a big lift and I'll just like do whatever. I just take it. And if I miss it, who gives a fuck? I
Mhm.
think that idea of like have something to win or have something to lose on a big lift. I kind of like
Mhm.
that. I kind of like
Yeah.
that personally. And being ready for it. And then being
Mhm.
like, okay, I think I have pretty good odds of fucking smashing the shit out of this and making it. So
Yeah.
I love hearing your kind of like experience and approach. Tends to reflect mine. That kind of makes sense
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of on the same page with it. I think and I could probably be talked into changing my mind around it for
Yeah.
certain people, like
Yeah.
I think for myself, I could just in my own athletic career, misses were rarely worth it. I mean, sometimes, attempting a big weight felt productive, but a lot of the time it just felt dangerous, especially as I got further into my career. Um, and I think there is something too for athletes to putting some pressure on, hey, if you miss, you have to be done.
Mm. Yeah.
If if they feel like I can miss 5 times in a session and just kinda, like, keep rolling, it I don't think encourages the kind of intentionality that is productive.
Mm.
Whereas if you know, "Hey, I'm trying to, like, hit something heavy today. If I miss this, like, second to last set, I've gotta be done." That makes you, I think, be a little bit more intentional on the way up. If you know, like, today is a no miss allowance kinda day and I miss and I have to move on, you might approach that top set a little bit differently than if you're in the habit of, "Well, if I don't make it the first time, I'll just try it another time. If I don't make it the second time, I'll just try again." Um, I think mindset-wise, it can be productive to limit those attempts.
Yeah. Well, and your technique would like almost by definition have to be more locked in to make all of your lifts. Because
Mhm,
I think about heavy attempts and even like Clark's and just lifts that weren't really likely to be good from the outset. And it's like your technique kind of morphs so much to just even get the bar moving.
mhm,
Um, which is why you miss it for a reason. So I think that then, like you mentioned, if you miss five, you probably distorted your technique enough to miss five. And then it's
mhm,
like that's just not gonna I don't see that having great carryover. So like I think maybe like intra session you can kind of get away with it. But I think like long term, which is kind of what you ended up kind of hammering on, I think I kind of hammer on too, like long term, trying to see that trend towards very efficient, good movement, sustainable movement, that just has to span out a little bit more, like pan out. Um, so that makes sense. And then also having that like internal stipulation, maybe external stipulation of yeah, just try to not miss anything on this heavy day. At some point we can open it up more.
mhm,
And Justin, shout out to Justin. He's prepping for it's like I don't know if it's World Masters or Masters World. I don't know which would because there are like multiple of them.
mhm,
But it's in September, and when I started working with him, his like low back and shoulder were kind of giving him a bunch of issues, so he couldn't train consistently and feel good about it. And he's to the point where he's probably at like 85% to 90%, and doesn't miss really anything. And all of his reps look pretty good, like pretty sharp and pretty fast. And it's nice because I am unsure where his limit is now. It's like, wow, you actually look so good. You could tell me you could do another 15 kilos and I'd believe you, another 20 kilos. And that's probably better than just push hard. Okay, if you miss every week, that's probably fine and okay. Cause then I think that like that to me, that excitement of not knowing takes us a long way. And I don't
yeah,
think it makes much of a difference if you have like plus or minus 2 to 5 kilos, this training day versus that training day.
mhm.
Um, So I think it was a super productive conversation in the sense of trying to understand for me how to better communicate and plan bigger attempts so that it can kind of anchor a training block, and then also like a program or a longer term plan, what the expectations are and how the quality of the work kind of changes and how much you would dose in like bigger lifts, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I liked this conversation. I feel like I've got wheels turning all over the place. So
No, and I think it
I
helped. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I love it anytime I feel like we chat. And I hope it's this way for other coaches, people that listen. I'm like always excited to now check out a weightlifting program, work on some things, write some programs, do some video review. Like
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's good.
No, I think so too, and I think it at the very least, um, I read this passage in a Daniel Dennett book. I actually posted on my Instagram story. Uh, and if people aren't following me, it's at Josh underscore Phil WL, PHILWL, Philosophical Weightlifting 2, which will be a huge resource coming up. We're trying to change it more into like a coaching kind of service, bring on like another coach and then develop it as like a thing in and of itself. Um, two points to that, but to finish this line of thinking, oh, I think I'm gonna lose it now. What was I saying, Jesse?
I was trying to follow and now
I
now
lost it.
I have also
I
lost
lost
it.
it trying to shill my
Oh, we're
Instagram story. I was trying to shill
yes,
my
the
Instagram.
book quote.
Yeah, so from Daniel Dennett, the books From Bacteria to Bach and Back is how, the evolution of minds or how minds evolved. And he brings up this little idea of externalizing your thoughts, like saying them out loud, and how that would then, basically, as you say it, it has to be reprocessed because you're saying it, hearing it, and then it's processed in a different part of your brain. And then you would be able to handle that information differently. So he uses that as a kind of a springboard to say, yeah, you should talk to yourself. That'll allow you to process information differently and then come to like more novel, more complex, maybe different ideas and use that information, in a way that like could be beneficial. If you're like stuck on a problem or thinking about something abstract. Uh, so I think even just talking about things we agree on, I hear it back and then I'm like, that is what I think and that is what I should do and I should do a better
Mhm.
job of that. So I
Yeah.
think it's just beneficial even as confirmation bias, but then like I shouldn't just say it. I should also make sure this is like perfectly done too.
It's a good just reminder to be intentional because you
Yeah.
can say, "Okay, yeah, I do that is what I think." So then that means
Yeah.
that the
Yeah.
action steps I should be taking
Yeah.
consistently. And maybe we refine our processes
Yeah.
towards those goals.
Yeah. No, totally. And I love that. This was a fantastic chat. It was like so much fun to catch up with you. I did mention philosophical weightlifting changing slightly in that I'm trying to bring on another coach. So
Sweet.
kind of open it up to like sport performance.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna do more like pre-written programs, which might be like templates or something, just that people can purchase and use.
Yeah.
And one idea I've really liked and found really core to my values would be this idea of like a jacked and healthy program
I
of
like
like,
that.
yeah, just put on size, be fit, train, get stronger. Probably will have some like cardio component, which is very important for health. And I
Yeah.
found now having fucking just like loaded my legs with miles, like work capacity does feel very different when you're kind of more fit. And I
Right.
find sessions not to feel like they hit a like teetering out point where it's like, oh, I've done like 4 sets already and I have 3 more and I'm kind of feeling gas. It's like, oh, I could do more. It's more of just like a more local limit. It's like my shoulders are like super tired. I just can't stabilize the bar. But someone doing it, I feel totally capable of handling a ton of work. So that's been funny. That's been like funny. It's been interesting to experience, having never really done cardio seriously in the past. So hopefully people can eventually be on the lookout for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, programs and coaching kind of aligned with performance and with, just like health and well-being kind of more generally. Um, and then obviously you have one of the biggest, best and uh, purpose-driven teams in USA weightlifting, Power and Grace. Is there anything you didn't mention that people could check out if they're looking forward to? I know that there's that like programming series available and probably a whole lot of other stuff.
Yeah, we've got some stuff. Also, you're so nice with your introductions. We have, I mean, obviously one-on-one coaching available. We have a team of coaches that I think are incredible. And we've got some like generalized programs on Train Heroic as well. All of it you can find on our website. So website is simple. It's just powerandgraceperformance.com. We have some educational resources. So like you mentioned the program design. It's basically a program design 101. So talking through our process of writing a program, and you walk away with a couple templates to use and play around with and kind of apply what we talk about. And then we also have some like sports psych webinar
Yeah,
series on
cool.
there, and yoga and breath work. It's not a series, it's just a monthly thing
Oh, that's
where
awesome.
Morgan has been posting yoga and breath work.
When is it?
It's asynchronous now, so
Oh,
you
okay.
can do
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
so you
Holy
can
cow.
access them, so then you get the whole all of the recordings
Oh
of
my gosh.
different yeah, of
Oh, I
different
totally want to do that.
pose and meditation and whatnot. Yeah, Morgan is wonderful. So that is newer and something that I think we're all really excited about. It's a good just add on to strength work and really just any kind of athletic endeavor.
Yeah, I think about it as just like Jordan made this comment on the podcast, Jordan Fagenbaum. We were talking about conditioning for health,
Mhm.
and the physical activity guidelines say around 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity a week, which is like fucking mind blowing when you put that into time. That's like 3 hours of conditioning a week. And that like can be like I think he was saying something about it's based on met equivalents, so a whole bunch of measurement and like whatever stuff that can go over your head pretty fast. But it's like if you walk fast enough, that might count. But it's probably like low level to high level, or like low intensity to high intensity, deliberate conditioning. If you care, it's this is to maximize your return for the most part, and to have the best health outcomes possible based on like this risk assessment. That's a lot of fucking time. You have to be very intentional about it. And when you stack that on to weightlifting or like resistance training, which can be 2 to 5 days a week, you end up being like spending so much time training. It's like, what
Yes.
do I have time left for? And that was like his hypothesis of, a lot of people who are really physically active, they do conditioning, they train with weights. They don't have a lot of time left for just like other things that could be detrimental to their health. And I think about this, like I trained last night, I ran afterward. That's like 3 hours, like 2.5 hours. Like I'm gonna eat and I'm gonna go, I'm gonna
Mhm.
go to sleep. Whether or not
Yeah.
I like it, that's my night. Um,
Mhm.
then you take, this like breath work and yoga stuff and you start to incorporate that. And it's like, wow, you have this really well built out kind of self-care routine that's like
Yeah.
really supportive for your short term, medium term, and long term health. And then it just uses so much time. It's like, what else are you gonna do that would be, bad? You can really use that time to like live, by your values if that's something you care about. So I love the idea of using that. That's how I would use it. Of like, oh, I have some downtime. It's like I can fill it with, just movement and feeling
Mhm.
good and something that's kind of relaxing. So I'll put all that in the show notes. If people like the podcast, which I'm sure they do, if you're listening, you've made it to this point, you are what I would call a diehard. Um, Shout out to Bruce Willis. And you'll check out all the resources down below. We thank you all for tuning in, and we will catch you on another episode of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast.